well, that might have been a bad decision. So in case you're out of a loop, I was for a second until learning about it today and playing it. Mario Kart World had a little update recently. And there's no better way of putting this that this update has people pissed. That's the quick and short of it, but we need to get into why. Why are people now saying that this went from a 9.5 or a 9 out of 10 game all the way down to a 6 with a single change? Well, it all comes down to one thing, which is possibly crucial to the identity of Mario Kart World, which is its intermission tracks. This game's main marketing pitch, just the game's pitch as itself, is the fact that you can travel from one Mario Kart track to another. You've never been able to do that in any Mario Kart game previously, and that's what made this one so exciting. Oh, it's an open world kind of Mario Kart game. And they reflected this in the Grand Prix. With the Grand Prix, it's not a standard 3 laps on one track, 3 laps on the next, 3 laps on the next. It's a little bit weird and different. Of course, you do the first track, standard 3 laps on a race, but then for the second, third, and fourth races, you're driving from the previous course to the next one. And that takes up most of that track itself. And on paper, that might be really fun, and I personally quite like it. The issue arises with the fact that you only get to do 1 lap on the course which has been selected. And if that was kept to just Grand Prix, I think not that many people would have issues with this. However, this system is then applied to how it works in online races. Because in online races, you're basically given 3 options, and it's just going from the track you just raced on to one of the 3 options. And maybe randomly, you'll get given an option to do a regular race on one of the tracks. And over the last 3 weeks or so that we've had this game, it seems like the loud majority have a very strong distaste to the intermission tracks and system. And the justification for that can be varied. It can come from people just not liking the in-between tracks, the fact that they can only do 1 final lap on the track which they selected, the fact they're just not as exciting and intricately designed as the tracks themselves. You could go on and on for reasons why they don't like it. Me personally, I like the intermissions to an extent. My perfect situation would be having the final race on the lap just be 3 laps, so it's for intermission plus 3 laps on a track. I don't think that would be too long. I don't think that would be too crazy. Maybe it could even vary between doing 1 lap, 2 laps, or 3 laps, just to spice it up and give different variety to the length of tracks. I don't know. Regardless, since the game has came out, people have come up with a solution in tackling this. It was a bit of a weird, funky workaround, but it was quite cool that Nintendo had this in place, basically. So when you were playing online, in just standard race mode, if you selected random, you would randomly be given just a standard track to do 3 laps on. So if you didn't like intermissions and you definitely didn't want to do them, you just wanted to have a standard classic Mario Kart experience, just click random. And although having this not said to you out loud and it just sort of being hidden and random, like of a better word, it's worked and it seemed to please people in every corner. And if you still wanted to do the intermission tracks, you could just select it as usual. And then, it's a chance it will do that one or a chance it'll do random and everything would be fine. But it seems like Nintendo have taken a bit of a disliking to this potentially. I'm not sure, maybe it was just not intentional to be this way, but in the latest Mario Kart update, they've made it so when you hit random, it's not always going to be a standard classic race. It can be an intermission race, which makes people who really don't like that mode, who really don't like the intermissions, most likely to dislike it even more because they're being overexposed to it. They don't want to do it, they just want to have a standard classic race, and they're forcing to do it. They need to get more and more angry and upset about this, and I think that's what we've seen quite explosively on social media, because I'm going around, I'm looking on Twitter. I haven't been playing that much Mario Kart in the last couple of days. I've just been busy since I went to LA for VidCon, which was really fun. Got a lot of other life stuff going on. I was planning on playing this game basically every day and making videos about it every day, but unfortunately, that hasn't how it's been going for the last 3 weeks for me. So I go online, I check Twitter, and everyone is incredibly upset at this, it seems. And an aspect which I didn't know until seeing a clip from Shortcut was that bagging is almost necessary if you want to win on these intermission tracks. Now, in case you don't know what bagging is, it's basically just staying at the back of a race in Mario Kart, trying the best items, and then taking a crazy shortcut and winning, just like holding on, bagging as it is, and then going like that. And this was incredibly prominent in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. I never really knew about this until getting back into it earlier in the year, and I was like, oh wait, what is this mechanic. A lot of people really don't like bagging. Lots of people just prefer front running, as it's called, which is be at the front. If you want to win, you've got to be first, which is how Mario Kart, I feel like, is intended to play. And Nintendo did a lot to mitigate bagging in this game. The lightning isn't as effective anymore. Recovery from being hit by items is a lot easier. It just seems like they tightened the gameplay a little bit more to avoid this aspect of competitive play. However, when it comes to these intermission tracks, there is huge, giant shortcuts which you can take, which if you have a golden mushroom or just triple mushrooms or anything of a sort, you can go from last to first in an instant, because it's just, they're so huge, they're so wide, they're so open, and I never really considered that until seeing this clip today earlier on Twitter. I'm like, wait, I guess that actually does make a lot of sense. And especially when that's followed up by just a single lap on whatever track you choose, it means that fighting against people doing that is incredibly difficult, because by the time you get to that first and final lap, the race is already over in a lot of cases. Now, before I go into solutions or any more rambles, one thing which I do want to say is some tracks I feel like work way better as intermissions, and I'll explain why. The ideal example which I'm talking about is DK Spaceport, because that track is almost like a reverse Mount Wario, it's just you do one lap, then another, then another, then another, then another, then you finish, and they're all individual and unique. You're never repeating yourself on that track. And so adding an intermission to the beginning of that track is pretty fun. It just extends the length of that race. And I feel like that track specifically, and a few others, are designed to work in tandem with these intermissions. Doing DK Spaceport by itself, I don't think is nowhere near as exciting as if you do it going from one track to DK Spaceport and finishing there. I think that's why it was the final course in the initial Mushroom Grand Prix, because that's just a really good, nice way to end. And there's also the conversation around unique courses and paths exclusive to the intermission tracks. For example, Shy Guy Bazaar has you going inside the palace if you enter it through a certain intermission. Or Mario Circuit has you racing it backwards if you go from somewhere like Toad's Factory. And probably my favorite, there's like this alternative course to Crown City where you're going through the back alleys and you're jumping on roofs and stuff. It is so much fun, and I'm like, I wish that course was a little bit longer, because it was just, it's so cool. But you can only do it through intermissions, I think. It's a bit weird, And in some ways, I think this really does work for the game in a lot of cool aspects, because it feels very random and sort of formatted a little bit similar to how Breath of the Wild was, where your experience is tailored to you, where you sort of have these memories of what happened. Like, once me and my friend were doing this course, and then a tornado came out of nowhere, and we'd never seen that before during an intermission. We're like, whoa, what? Why is there a tornado here? Or, the helicopters and the UFOs and all these like little funny little mechanics which happen. I think having that aspect of not knowing what you can expect works very well with Mario Kart. But at the same time, having that established 3 laps on a course, which you can time trial and get better at and then take on competitively, is a totally valid approach as well. And it's sort of unfortunate that both of these ideas clash when it comes to online. And I think the obvious choice would be for Nintendo to have a separate game mode, a competitive mode. And you could say we technically have that already with Knockout Tour, but Knockout Tour is just its own mode entirely. I feel like Versus Races sort of just has a mix of everything inside of it, and it's a little bit unfortunate after coming off of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's, unfortunately, superior online. You could set up custom tourneys with custom rules. You could do global versus national. There was so many fun little quirks to that, which just gave you more options on what you would do with online. This, of course, we have Knockout Tour, which is amazing. But when the only option to play races is this single option online, and you can't even do Knockout Tours with like your buddies or anything, you can understand why people become frustrated and feel like they're getting pigeonholed into playing the game a certain way when really they want to play it a different way. And I've done videos in the past on my main channel where I've decided to figure out solutions to these problems in video games, which I love. And I guess I could do it with Mario Kart World as well, but at the same time, I feel like a lot of the points which I would make are kind of obvious, really. And there's multiple ways they could go about it. They could just make it so that intermission tracks, if they're not races similar to DK Spaceport, where they have a specific finish, vary it up. Add an extra lap or two to make it more interesting and give people a chance to fight anyone who is doing bagging. Because if you can only bag at the beginning half of a race, it doesn't really matter, because everything could change on that final 2 laps or so. It's just the fact that you can bag up to the point where you're guaranteed a win is where it becomes an issue. Who cares if you bag on the first lap if it means you have 2 or 3 or 4 more laps to combat that? And I really don't think it'll make the races too long. But I don't think all hope is lost. Some people are immediately saying this game has gone down to a 6 out of 10 or something. If you feel that way, I wouldn't stress too much because this game is going to be made to last 8 to 10 years. And I wouldn't be surprised if we get a new update to this game every 3 or 4 months, honestly. And we're only 3 weeks in, so let's brace ourselves. Let's wait and see where things will go. But those are just my thoughts. What about your thoughts? What do you think about Mario Kart World making this decision? Do you like it? Some people might be a bit upset if you say you do. But let's leave it at that. And be sure to stay subscribed to Mood News. It's not called Mood News, it's called GetMadz Lite. Be sure to stay subscribed to GetMadz Lite for all things Mood News, I guess. All right, bye.